Alright, we're going to talk about how to replace your whole control bar with leaders on a Navigator Pro. I've got good news for you, it's just got a whole lot easier. If you've replaced a regular Navigator, then there's a lot less steps for this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remove your rear lines from the bar. And so I think the easiest way to do this is to grab onto your width adjuster and just pull the line all the way out until you get to the loop-to-loop connection. Now by pushing those together, you can ease that off, pull all the way through. To your lower leader. I'm just going to loosen that lark's head, take that bottom one off, and pull the line all the way over. Take the upper leader off, and then that line's going to pull through. Okay, same on the other side. Pull that all the way out until I get to the flying line. Push those loops together. Pull down until I get to the lower leader. Loosen this lark's head. Take that off. Flying line off. I'll put those aside for later. Take that line out. So once you've taken your rear lines off, I'm going to grab onto the landing line and I'm going to pull that all the way through until I get to the line connection. Now push those two apart. Pull it all the way down, put the swivel and everything through the flying line loop and take that off also. Okay, so now I'm going to get this handy little jig. If you haven't got one, don't worry, this just makes it a bit easier, and we're going to share this 3D file with you anyway if you've got a 3D printer, so you can print it off yourselves and it just helps to hold it. Now get a drift pin, this one's 3mm, and it just makes it easy to push down on these little dimples on the dual pin to snap that apart. So once that pin's out, the QR is going to come off. We can put that aside as well, and then just pull this flying line back a bit, so we can take the depower main line just with your fingers. You can pry this off, and we're just going to take that loop over that flying line. So once you've got that loop off, now you can just give the larger tube a bit of a push and it will come out the bottom there. So now I'm going to grab my little drift pin again. There's a little plastic part in here which is flaring the PU tubing out. Now I'm going to put that inside and just wedge that one out. That's another little easy to lose part, so make sure you put that somewhere carefully. So now those are apart, it's able to just slide that top spinning handle off as well. So now we've got this whole trim system can slide off your old bar. I've got another new bar here. And it's important here to thread the right tubing through the right side. So there's a larger hole on one side and a smaller hole. So that's going to correspond to the two tubing. So the smaller hole has the depower mainline tube to go through, and the larger hole has the landing line tube. So make sure you get those the right way around. That's going to mean that you can still sheet your bar nice and smoothly. Okay, so we're going to put the top spinning handle on. Just get that depower mainline and squeeze it a bit. Make sure it's easy to put through. Put that through the small hole. Push the tubing up. Now this larger landing line tubing can be a bit hard to put through because it's been flared out. So if you push it in, it is a bit flexible, so give it a bit of a twist and through it goes. Okay, so the first thing I would do is get this depower main line and put a tool through the end so you can stretch that out. There's a few different ways to do this. Some people like to do it with a flying line and pull it out with that, but I find this the easiest way personally. So I grab some multi-grips in my other hand and I use a tool to pull that depower main line out, so I've got a lot of line to work with, and then I just clamp it off with a tool. Now, take this tool off. Put that little line through, and now I just massage it around with my thumb and get it onto that little groove. You want that to be flush with the edges of the plastic. Okay, now that's on, we can push the landing line tubing out, and we've got another little jig that can make this easier. So we'll share the files for this as well if anyone's got a 3D printer and they want to make their world easier. Now grab this little PU insert, and you'll notice it's not completely symmetric. There's one side has a bigger hole and a more generous radius, and the other side's a bit smaller. So you want to have the bigger hole facing outwards. So I'm going to pop that onto this little jig. And then if you like, you can heat the end of this up with a bit of hot water, but seeing it's already been flared out and I've got this handy little jig, I can just kind of squeeze it on there. Now the good thing about having this jig, you don't need to use it, but it has a little 0.5mm step in it, which ensures that the PU insert is pushed in just inside flush of the end of the tubing. That's the spot where you want it to be. So once you're happy that that's all level, then you can just pull that back inside. Now that stops the tubing from pulling out from the inside of the spinning handle. Okay, now we can push that flying line through a bit, and we're ready to put the QR back on. Thread that through. Now you'll notice on the QR shaft there's these little dimples that have been machined out of here. Now these little dimples, they have to line up with the holes in the spinning handles, and that's where your knurled pin will go through to connect everything together. So wiggle that back on there, push that line through. And you'll notice there's a little key on the top spinning handle. Now that also corresponds with a little slot in the bottom spinning handle. So those go together nicely. And then I'm just going to push the shaft through, and I can rotate the end here until it lines up nicely, and you can see the hole is flush. Grab my other little holding jig. I'm going to get the knurled pin, pop that in. Once again, I can kind of turn the end of the shaft to feel when that's in place. Once that's in place, I'm going to grab my multi-grips again, make them a little bit wider. I've wrapped a bit of tape on here so it's not going to damage the pin or the spinning handle. And I can just squeeze that together. You could use a rubber mallet or something like that if you don't have multi-grips. But you just want this to be flush at the end and flush on this side. Okay, so that is our trim system all together. Well, we've got that line out there, we may as well put the spinning handle back on. So I'm just going to feed the end of the flying line through there. Feed the landing line swivel through. Sometimes these lines can get a little bit twisted. We want to make sure that's a really clean figure eight there. Once it's looking clean, no twists, then put some pressure on it and pull it in nice and tight. So then reach above the power bracket and pull that line all the way back through. Now that loop-to-loop knot is actually kept nice and small by pulling into this power ball here. There's actually a tapered fitting, and so when there's load on that, it's actually encouraging it to stay nice and small. So if you do ever need to deploy, it's going to pull through the tubing nice and easily. Okay, so now it's time to reconnect our flying lines. So I find it easiest to just pull this. I'm just going to connect the end of my flying line. I'm actually just going to tie a knot around this, and that's going to pull through the flying line, although it's not connected properly yet. I'm going to pull it out the bottom, and then I'm going to undo the new leader line, undo the lark's head, take that apart. So I'm going to thread the loop side of the leader line up through the flying line and then back through itself. Once again, we want this to be a really clean loop-to-loop connection. So once it is, then we can pull that together and then thread the lark's head back to the top knot, which is the factory setting. Then pull the flying line and the leader lines and everything back through the bar, back through to the top of the floats. Making sure that the plus is on the outside corresponding with the arrow there. Okay, I'm just going to go to my right side, at the end of my flying line, just tie a really loose knot here, don't need to be super tight. It's just an easy way to pull the end of your flying line through. Okay, disconnect my other leader line. We can get a nice loop-to-loop connection between the flying line and leader line. Do that with the knot. You can put either one through, either looped end. I'm going to put the flying line over, get a nice loop to loop back in, pull that tight, lark's head over the knots to the top knot. You want to make sure it's on top of the top knot. There we go. Pull the whole lot through, making sure the plus is out if that's how you like it. You could have the negative on both sides. And that's your new control bar. Good to go for another session.